More than 50% of the population claims they've experienced an after-death visit from a past loved one. And many people say these visions are often brief, but leave them with a sense of peace and serenity. These visits are frequently reported at their bedside or somewhere in nature. When the Roark family suffered a tragic and sudden loss, they were heartbroken. But in the days following the tragedy, they experienced a series of events that changed everything for them. On April 14, 1984, 18-year-old Paige Roark left her house in Fallbrook, California to meet up with some friends. She hugged her mom, Cynthia, and said goodbye, and as usual said she'd be home later. But this day, she didn't come home. 6 hours later, Paige Roark and one of her friends were killed when a drunk driver smashed into their car. Her mother, Cynthia, along with the rest of the family, was devastated. Cynthia Roark said she never felt so hopeless. She said her heart was crushed. She tried to overcome her grief by running, a passion of hers and something that she shared with Paige. In the mornings, the two would go on runs together. 2 days after the crash, Cynthia left her house at 5 a.m. for a solo run, or so she thought. After jogging for about an hour, and as dawn was breaking, Cynthia looked up and saw rays of sunshine coming through the trees of a nearby wooded area she was passing. The light suddenly got really bright, so she stopped and looked for a second, when all of a sudden, she heard a familiar voice, her daughter's. Paige's voice emerged from the light and said that she was okay. She said she was with God and said that she was fine. Cynthia stood there stunned and said she felt a great sense of peace and happiness wash over her at that moment. After days of anguish and grief, she felt serene. She knew her daughter was okay. The light slowly faded away, leaving Cynthia grateful and stunned. If this wasn't incredible enough, Cynthia soon realized she wasn't the only person who received a visit from Paige. Her spirit was busy. She had been traveling all over. Cynthia was shocked to learn that her mother, Paige's grandmother, who lived 1,000 miles away in Denver, had a similar and even more vivid visit from Paige. Dorothy, Paige's grandmother, said she was lying in bed late that night before when a bright golden light emerged in her bedroom doorway. When Dorothy looked up, she saw the spirit of Paige standing there in all white. She said she looked beautiful, peaceful, and perfect. She said Paige spoke to her and said, "I love you, Grandma. I'm okay. And so is Mom. I've seen Mom and I'll take care of her." Mom was the name they gave Dorothy's mother, Paige's great-grandmother, who had passed away years before. Dorothy began crying, emotional, but knew that this was her granddaughter visiting her. She said it was very, very real and she knew it happened. This was no dream. Dorothy said this visit from Paige made it clear that she was okay and gave her a sense of peace, just as it gave Cynthia. They also felt they didn't need to worry about Paige. She was okay. She said Paige was actually there to comfort them. Paige's spirit in the bright white light faded away, leaving Dorothy sitting in bed, stunned, just as her daughter was back in California. These experiences changed everything for Paige's family. The driver that killed Paige and her friend was a former elementary school teacher named Robert Scott Carlton, who was 29. He was later charged and sentenced to almost 11 years. And although they had to live without Paige, the family took comfort that she visited them after the accident. Dr. Melvin Morse, an associate professor at the University of Washington, looked into this case and believes that Cynthia and Dorothy's visions were real. For so many, these kinds of experiences have always been brushed aside as grief-induced hallucinations. But Dr. Morse, along with many others, believe that these visitations, these visions from loved ones, are real. They are real interactions between the person who passed away and the person who is experiencing the vision. And not just that, we can learn things from them. But many others don't believe they are real. Some see them as merely symptoms of the mind trying to deal with a terrible loss. But what do you believe? Have you ever experienced a visit from a past loved one? If you have, I would love to hear about it. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. I would love it if you subscribe to this channel, and if you haven't already, leave a like and a comment, and let me know what cases, places, and stories you'd like to see next on Avery After Dark. Until then, I'm Avery Ross, and this is Avery After Dark.